The stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell our prospects, the stories can help us generate loads of money, or they can help us be broke. In this episode today, we're going to talk about stories that can help you in the fourth quarter to get past that elusive, we need to think about it, or we need to go to a committee. You're going to love this one. Check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of the Sales Evangelist Podcast. I'm your host, Donald C. Kelly, the Sales Evangelist. And I'm so excited for another great episode. I'm so excited to be here with you today. On this episode, we have a fantastic guest, Mr. Matthew Pollard. Matthew and I go way back. Back in the days like 2014, I had him on a podcast, and you can hear some of his episodes. But one of the things he does, he is just a darn good storyteller. And he has that amazing Aussie accent as well that helps you to be able to get enthralled into his messages. But one of the things that he teaches simply is that we don't have to conform to the way that most people do selling. We don't have to go to the same way, like in this particular episode of going to the collective bargaining sessions. And he goes into the psychology of how we can why people go into that world. Why do they say we have to go to committee? And how can we get past that? Is it a possibility? You're coming into Q4 and you're going to get some of that. We want to accelerate deals through the pipeline, but we don't want to make it about us. We want to make it about our prospect. In today's episode, he's going to give us a master class on how to do that. I love the story that he shares on this electrician, and you're going to hear it in the episode. But if this is your first time listening to our podcast, go ahead and subscribe. We're going to notify you every time we drop a new piece of episode. And the other piece to this too is that I want to make sure you understand this show is designed to help you, one, either build pipeline, or two, to accelerate deals through that pipeline faster. And today, this concept is going to help you to get deals moving faster. As we dive in, you get a chance to learn about Matthew, but you get a chance to understand why he's so passionate about stories and about how we can utilize stories to help us get past some of these humps. Check it out. Matthew, welcome back to the show. Excited to have you.
Mate, I'm excited to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is a good stuff, man. It's always exciting to bring someone on that brings a lot of value to the show. What you did was, I don't know if you, way back in the days, you came on my show and graced me with your presence, and what I love about it, you tell amazing stories that afterwards everyone feels like they can actually go and do something. Sometimes you talk to people and they're like, okay, that was a lot of theory, but it was very practical and inspiring that I was like, crap, I can go do some of this stuff. So I appreciate the motivation you gave to me as the host and then also to our audience. So you're a no-brainer to bring back on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I think that, it happens all the time, right? When I speak at events, one of the things I hear all the time is, the advice we got from stage was like, so if you spend the next 8 months, you might be able to operationalize this. I'm like, no, let's do something that people can apply tomorrow.
Yes, give me now.
Exactly.
Which goes greatly into our thought, because I want to give something that people can apply right now. We are right now recording this episode September 22nd. We are literally 8 days from Q4, and it is going into crunch time. October is like, I find that is the month to make things happen, because November becomes really iffy and December is like 2 weeks out of the month. You have people there. I want, in a corporate situation, in a sales environment that we have, enterprise selling, you have multiple decision makers. We know that to be true. But is there a way that I can accelerate the deals faster nowadays? Do you have any tactics, strategies that I could utilize, or a seller on my, listening to this episode can utilize, maybe to get past that collective decision making or collective bargaining, so to speak, that committee, and to help them to accelerate deals? That's a big ask. So hopefully you have something.
Good. So
if not, we're going to talk about cold call.
So I think that one of the biggest things that happens is, if you think about the past, people used to be gung-ho about being the decision maker and taking that risk. And they wanted to be seen as the reason for why the initiative succeeded. And these days, and especially since COVID, people they shy away from being the one that makes the decision. They want that collective decision making. But the reason being is a lot of the decisions they're making feel like they're a lot more technical now, a lot more confusing, a lot harder to decide on. And especially if you're selling something complex like finance or technology, or something in the medical field, like what happens is the seller from what I see happen way too often is the seller comes in and says, let me educate you on everything you need. And then I'll bring in solution specialists and they'll educate you even more. Let's download 30 years of experience into your head so you can make a decision. And I mean, my brain would say, actually, let me get 65 other people involved because I don't understand a thing you're saying. And the truth is, it drives me nuts that people don't understand this. Like a lot of times I do this thing from stage where I invite somebody up on the stage to tell a story. And they'll then tell this story, and it's usually about them or, how they locked in this deal. And then eventually I get to the point where, hang on a second, who's the customer? And they're like, I'm just going to pick a name at random. Oh, it's Microsoft. Microsoft isn't a customer. A person is buying. Who's the person that's buying? Oh, it's the CTO. Again, position title isn't a person. Who is the person? Oh, it's John. John is the person that's scared when they're getting hit with all this information. John is the person that's overwhelmed. And that's why he wants to get 65 other people involved to say, let's all decide together so my job's not at risk. The other thing is John is looking to advance his career. But if you're talking about how you can solve the problem as opposed to selling to the person that's making the decision, why would they want to make that decision themselves? So what I find is that the best way to sidestep collective decision-making is giving the person you're speaking to a reason to champion you, to help them realize that you're on their side. And the best way to do that is through stories that absolutely highlight that you understand them. So what I find is, and by the way, I hate case studies and testimonials, right? No salesperson should use them. They sound braggy, and the whole marketing department writes them because the marketing department has learned about storytelling from a marketing storytelling trainer. The sales team needs stories that aren't braggy, that come from a natural, I worked with this customer, I got them amazing results. They need a story that in a lot of ways is almost a theatrical masterpiece that talks about how you met a client. The best example I can give you is I worked with a $1 billion cloud company, and occasionally I will tell stories from stage like I work for them so that everybody that's new at selling that thinks they need 30 years of experience to sell can see me do it and go, well, if I sound like I've got 30 years of experience and I'm external, imagine what they could do. And so this time I interviewed, it would have been 7 people in the room. And at the end of 20 minutes of, to put it politely, an interrogation to get the jargon out of them, I then told them the story back in about 45 seconds. They're like, well, how did you do that? I'm like, well, using more emotive storytelling that's far more individual specific. I said, but who's the customer? And of course, they started talking about government organization, then the CTO. Eventually, we got it down to David. And we got to the point where David, I said, why did they want to move into the cloud? And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, why did they make the decision? And the answer, of course, was because it was such an amazing salesperson. They chased up and they followed up and eventually submitted the person to buying. I'm like, that's not why people make a decision. Why did they move into the cloud? They didn't know. They had to go find out. It turns out it was a government organization. And David had this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset, which worked perfectly well right up until the server crashed right before Thanksgiving. Biggest spending season of the year, they couldn't run payroll. David's the guy that ruined Thanksgiving. Now, when you think about that and you think about the fact that he had to go into work during Thanksgiving and leave his family behind and had to bring his team in to do the same, and the fact that they all probably were worried about losing their jobs, can you imagine telling that story afterwards, saying, I understand you want to have on-prem resources, but let me tell you about David, and then telling the story about how David ruined Thanksgiving and how he moved into the cloud and actually got a promotion at the end because of how well he handled the situation. You're like, you know what? That makes sense. Forget about collective decision-making. I am doing this no matter what because I'm never going to be responsible for this. All of a sudden, you skip past the collective decision-maker. Now, if you're thinking about somebody that, if you've got an initiative that saves money or increases productivity, especially in today's world, you can go to a collective decision-making group and say, okay, let's make this decision together because if it doesn't work, I want everybody to share that responsibility. But if the story has a punchline of this person took responsibility and got a promotion at the end, you're like, well, this is career advancement. I'm going to be the one that makes this decision. Yeah. That's the difference. And then you go beyond your single point solutions, which is the other problem that so many people have. It's like, well, people call us and they say they want this one thing. We start talking about a fuller solution. They freak out because that's going to make, they've already decided collectively that this is what they want to do. So as soon as you can talk about how this one person came for a single point solution, they made a decision to step beyond that, and here's why. And they became the hero to their organization, and that's why they got promoted or hit their KPIs or then got headhunted. All of a sudden, the person listening is like, oh my gosh, I don't want anyone else to touch this. I want to take full credit for this initiative.
So let's unpack a bunch of that, which I love that story. David, wherever you're listening, congratulations on a promotion. But there's a couple pieces that the thing that I kind of went from the undertone, and I see this. You've seen like what you call it? I forgot the guys who wrote Challenge of Sale, Matt Dixon, and one of the things that they pointed out in a new book, Jolt, came out a few years ago, was this idea that collective decision-making process and how we do so. The fear is what drives that, right? The fear that I might do something that's not going to work, or the fear that my career is on the line. But I love how you reframe that with stories by giving examples of the person instead of me shunning it, me not being fearful because I'm no longer a guinea pig. You just motivated me by sharing examples of people that have done this already and how these individuals doing it have been successful. Therefore, I could do this too because it's worked for them. That's what I took from that.
You're absolutely right. So if you think about the decision making, so people do want to move towards pleasure, but they'll do a lot more to protect themselves against harm. So if you're hitting them with a bunch of jargon, their reptilian brain is freaking out and they're like, I need more people to be involved in this decision.
Yeah.
Instead, if you speak to them about other people that have had this successful initiative, now it doesn't feel like a risk. So now I can feel positive and I'm like, oh, I want to move towards pleasure. Now, I don't want to say that all sales strategies are being created by a bunch of Matts, but Matt Dixon's work is great. And one of the things he talks about, and he's endorsed my book, and I think the world of his.
Yeah.
And at the end of the Challenger sale, he talks about the fact that people's buying behavior is shifted, and I'm gonna put that through a lens of since COVID, especially. But people these days aren't willing to take as much risk unless their paradigm's been shifted. So the Challenger sale, the whole book's thesis is if you can challenge them on the reasons why they're making this decision and then confront them with that and help them see things differently, then they're far more likely to make a decision and they're far more likely to not fight you on price or timeline because they see you as the person that can supply a better solution, something that hadn't occurred to them before. And that creates a whole lot more loyalty as well. So for me, I believe that storytelling is one of the best approaches. It's funny, like I see a lot of people on 30-minute calls and it drives me nuts, the first piece. So I'm going to segue for a second because if you're a seller that's doing this, please stop. The number of people that say at the beginning of the call, oh, Donald, I'm so glad we can get on a call together today. Tell me a little bit about your business. My brain says, sure, I'd love to. After checking out my website, what questions do you have? And you watch them fall apart. They've done no research. And you'll see these people that their organization has spent thousands getting them this sales phone call, but then they don't come prepared because they don't want to invest a huge amount of time until they know it's a worthwhile prospect. It takes seconds these days to say something like, I'm so glad we could meet. I've taken a moment to look at your LinkedIn profile. I've checked out your website. Of course, there's a lot of context there, but it doesn't really tell me specifically about this initiative. So what I'd love to do is take a step back, hear a little bit more about you, what you're struggling with, and how I can be the most help to you in the time we have together today. So if you set up the call differently to say, hey, I've done my research. So we can skip past, by the way, the last thing you want is a 30-minute monologue on the business before you get what they want. So it saves you a ton of time to spend seconds doing your research. But then once you have, what you want to do is listen, which for the extroverts listening, you might want to learn to do that more effectively, right? I do a lot teaching introverts, how to be successful. Introverts have the ability to listen amazingly. Extroverts need coaching, but listen to what they're saying. Don't listen to speak. Listen to what they're saying and listen to what they're saying from a perspective of, did they have a collective decision made that this is the single point solution that they want? Or what was the driver behind the decision? Because what you'll usually hear is they've said, I want this piece of, which led us to decide we want this piece of technology or we want this solution. And then what your job is to do, only one thing, is to ask one question to help them realize they haven't understood the foundational piece of what that decision should have been, or they haven't considered something, or make a statement to highlight that and say, actually, you know what? The reason why I'm asking this is because I'm worried about enter piece of information. And then say, actually, you know what? Let me give you an example. And then tell a story of someone else that came looking for that single point solution and how you got them to a different result. And to use Matt's work, what I've done is I've actually confronted them. I've challenged them on the way they see the world. But instead of hitting them with jargon, which most people do, which in a lot of ways engages the logical mind, by telling a story, the science says I short circuit the logical mind, speak directly to the emotional brain. Now, the emotional brain assumes all the data is fact, which is amazing for a seller, and all they're listening for is the moral. Secondly, because story activates the reticular activating system of the brain, if you're an introvert, you're going to love it. Because what happens is it creates artificial rapport that introverts can turn into real rapport. Extroverts, by the way, when you use story, it will work better than your small talk that you do up front. And then on top of that, people remember up to 22 times more information. So by remembering more, by feeling like they've got a better connection, and by short-circuiting the logical brain and speaking to the emotional brain, all while challenging the way they see things and giving them a case study that's not a marketing case study, but a real story that helps them see them in the story of someone else that got a promotion while delivering the result for their organization. Like, don't get me wrong. I would like to think that people care about their organizations. They care about themselves getting promoted more. And more importantly, if they can have their cake and eat it too, why wouldn't they? You put all of that together. It's a science, it's an emotional cocktail that people will jump to say, you know what? I want to be responsible for this one. I normally wouldn't feel comfortable, but this time round, I'm going to take a jump because I believe in this person. I feel an uncanny connection. And for the first time, I actually remember some of the stuff he said.
Because it's easy. It's like you're telling a story to me. But I want to go back into this part and go deeper into what you're sharing here. Does that, what's the frame, the frame of that story, or how would you outline this process of telling that story? Because you took it from the client that you brought on stage, or whatnot. You brought it down to 45 seconds that they took 6 whatever minutes to decide, or however long they took it to tell you. How can you make that simple so that I could follow this if I'm listening to this episode? Or am I making sense there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first thing is to realize the story is about a person, not a company. Okay. And it's about the transformation, not the technology. Nobody cares what you do until they see that you care. And then they actually care far less about what you do. They just want you to do it. So the framework actually is going to push sellers to think differently, because a lot of times when I ask sellers certain questions, they actually don't know the answers. Like, why did that person go into the cloud? Oh, I don't know. I need to go and find out. Or it doesn't occur to them that piece is important. So if you think about the initial piece of the story, what you really need to think about is, and I like to break it down into 3 pieces. So I look at stories as 4 parts. You've got the first part, or the initial problem or outcome they're trying to achieve. You've got the implementation. You've then got the result, and then you've got the moral of the story. And most people think the moral is self-evident, but if you don't explicitly say it, first thing is you can't say, so what you can get from this story is this. Does that make sense? And that's a perfect lead into them saying yes, and now you're in yes questioning, and you can move on. But then more importantly, you can't be sure that they're taking from it what you do, because your 30 years of experience is telling you one thing, and their point of view might be different just if they've had their morning coffee or not. But if you think about the beginning, most people talk about the real cost of the problem and was that realized. But there are 3 elements you really need to focus on. And the best example I can give you, this goes back. There was a time I used to sell customer service training. And every now and then when I was working with my sellers, they would tell me the leads are rubbish or the market has changed. And I couldn't convince them that was wrong. So I would just say, look, do me a favor, pick any lead out of the deck. I will go and sell to it. And they would always honor my willingness to prove a point by picking the furthest lead away. So this time round, they picked the lead. It would have been 45, 50-minute drive. This was before I moved to the United States. So this was when I was in Melbourne, Australia, and the appointment was out in Lilydale, which, it was a drive. And so when I got there, back then, I used to ask the question, so what problems do you see in your business? And usually, and back then we were focused purely on, people in the trades, mostly electricians. And they would always respond with, well, we don't really have any problems in our business. They'd be thinking to themselves, I'm sure, who's this guy in a suit telling me I've got problems? And I would say, really, because the last 60 electricians we've spoken to in the last 60 days say they've got this problem, this problem, this problem. You sure you don't have any of these? And it would always lead them to go, well, actually, I've got all those problems and all these as well. Because now they see that I understand them. I'm not just some random stranger. And this is the importance of knowing your avatar. But this time round, it didn't happen. This time round, he looked at me and said, well, actually, no, I don't have any of those problems. And I went, oh, gosh, I've got a lot riding on this. I've driven all this way. I've got the sales team hoping that I don't close this deal. So I feel like my voice broke at this point. And I was like, really? You don't have any problems at all? And it was like he took pity on me. He's like, well, if I've got to think about a problem, I guess it would be that occasionally my staff don't clean up after themselves. And so like any good salesperson, I jumped on that. I went, well, how much is that costing you? And he said, well, I mean, if I thought about it, not much. I mean, I pay my staff about $28 an hour. Occasionally they don't clean, maybe a couple of $100 a month. I'm selling a $10,000 per head training. No chance of closing that deal.
No.
This is the world of real cost. And a lot of times people's whole world exists in this. So I went one step further and I said, okay, let me think about this for a second. What do I know about electricians? Well, I know that a lot of electricians, they want to get off the tools as much as they can, but a lot of times they end up having to go and do jobs. So I said, do you ever go and see clients yourself? And he said, well, I mean, yeah, but not as often as my team. I said, well, how many people do you go see? He goes, well, my team probably sees about 40 people a month. I probably see only about 10. I said, okay. Do you ever get any referrals off those people? He said, yeah, I mean, all the time. Like if I go see 10, I probably get, say, 3 referrals. I said, okay. And do you make a small amount or a larger amount on the referrals? And he's like, well, no, I mean, always a larger amount. Somewhere between, I know, sometimes we get $100,000. I'm just doing a factory rewire right now of somebody we did a pool light for at their family home. I said, yeah, but if you picked your minimum, what would it be? Oh, let's call it $1,000. Great. So if you were to see 10 people, it would be fair to assume at a minimum you'd make $3,000 in referrals. He's like, well, yeah, that's fair. I said, okay. What about your team? Do they ever get any referrals? Oh, not as many as me. They'd be lucky to get 1 or 2. And I said, oh, one or 2. Like if you were seeing
40,
if you were seeing 40 people, you would be getting 12 referrals. I'm not saying you'd have time for that, but there seems to be a discrepancy of 10 referrals. I said, how many staff do you have? He's like, I've got 5.
Oh my goodness.
So hold on, that's like 50 referrals that you could be missing. That's at a minimum 50,000, but you said one lead was 100,000. All told, I have no idea how much money, but a minimum of $50,000. This is the world of opportunity cost that he didn't realize. So now, when I'm talking about opportunity cost, 50,000 means on a $10,000 training per head, it's a return on investment in 30 days. Now, my ability to close that deal is huge, but that would still result in, if it was a larger corporation, collective decision-making, because why not get everybody to agree to it, and getting him to make a decision at some point in the future because he's motivated. But let's face it, tradespeople tend to hate education, so they'd put it off as much as they could. So I need to mobilize action. This is what I move into emotional cost, and I feel like this is the most powerful thing in the world. I said, does it ever get to a Friday night and all your team has clocked off and you get this phone call from a really upset customer that because one of your staff members last job didn't clean up, rushed out to the pub maybe, and you've been left with the bag. He said, you know what? My wife and daughter aren't talking to me right now. He said, it just happened last Friday. I got a phone call from an irate customer who was really angry because they didn't clean up. I had to go. I pay all this money for digital advertising, and if I get one bad review, that puts my average down. It cost me money forever. I had to go clean up, but I missed my daughter's dance recital. Now, how motivated at this point does he want? Is it for him to make this decision? He's hyper motivated. He knows he can get a return on investment in 30 days. If I'm half as right, 2 months, and his wife and daughter aren't speaking to him. So when I tell a story, let's say I'm in a networking event or in a sale, and somebody says they don't have any problems. I'm like, actually, you know what? You remind me a lot of so-and-so. So, and in this occasion, let's call them Trevor. You remind me a lot of Trevor. And when I met Trevor, he said that he didn't have any problems either. Here's what happened. Real cost, opportunity cost, emotional cost. The implementation was customer service training. The outcome was Real cost, he doesn't have to send people back anymore. So what? Small amount of money. Opportunity cost, well, actually only got about 37 leads instead of 50, but he made hundreds of thousands more, not 50,000. And he's never missed a kid's dance recital or football game since. Moral of the story. So while you may think you don't have any problems, sometimes the problems that are costing our business and our personal lives most of all are the ones that we don't see. So would you mind if we took a moment to do a deep dive into what problems that we may not be able to see exist in your business? Who's going to say no to that? Oh my gosh. Okay, now I'm willing to take. Now, a lot of times when we get phone calls, people want a single point solution, but the same objective can be the case. You can tell a story about how they had this single point solution that would have been expensive, hard to operationalize. But if they had a fuller solution implemented, they would have looked like a hero, and it would have saved money, and it would have led from, instead of technology potentially being the problem in our business that's retroactive, to the first time people are like, wow, I go to this department for innovation, which of course gets the CTO a promotion or an invite to the boardroom.
Amazing. Amazing. I'm still stuck on the just like the first part of that story. Like, I don't have any problems, and then now looking at the end of it, this guy. And this all ties back to the very beginning too, of how we can go about, how we can go about looking at, getting past that collective decision making. People want, and one of the things you said early on is that people want to feel like, if you can help people to feel like, I don't want that to happen to me, and I'm the person in charge of it. It just makes it, it sidesteps a lot of the risk, so to speak. This is, like you said, way better case study because it's real.
And the thing is that I love morals to be far more about, and it doesn't matter if you work with us or not, I really believe that you should do this. Like when you sit down with somebody, you tell them a story like that, and then you say, so whether you decide to work with us or not, I just want you to know that if you consider this fuller solution, here are the results you're going to have, and you owe it to your career and to your organization to do this for them. However, of course, if you just want this single point solution, I'm of course very willing to quote on that, and we should fixate just on that because I want to make sure that you get what you want. I just don't want to do you I don't want to hurt you or not give you the best possible outcome as part of this conversation. So what would be your preference? Do you want to stick to the single point, or do you want to talk about how we can help you in a fuller way? Somebody's always going to say, actually, talk to me about the fuller way. Or they might say, actually, you know what? I would love to talk to you about the fuller way. But really, I know our organization is only going to agree to this, but I'd love to collaborate with you about how we could do that as a next step. But at that point, they're still going to lobby for you because they've got two proposals that are the same, but one gives them a pathway to a promotion and the organization a pathway to fuller implementations, and one doesn't. Why wouldn't they pick yours? What you want them to do is go to that proposal, as a part of that collective decision-making, if it has to happen, and instead of looking at both and going, that one's cheaper, let's do that, they'll say, you know what, this group feels like the right choice because. And the other thing I love about storytelling is if you talk about how you're there to hold people's hands the whole way through, and you're there to support, no one's going to believe it when you just say, we provide great customer service. But if you include it in a story, think about what people are worried about. They go home and their spouse says, last time you did a technology transformation, or the last time you bought something like this, you ended up working weekends for the next 6 weeks to do the implementation because it didn't work out. So if you talk about the fact that they were worried about that at the front end of the story and how you prevented that from being the case, they'll believe that their weekends are going to be free if they hire you, and they don't know that's true about the competitor.
Yeah. It's such a small thing that people would assume that it's not a critical component. But just like with this guy missing the dance recital for his daughter and so forth, that little thing is what made, can make a huge, big difference. But I just feel that most sellers don't understand how to do that. And I don't know, this was masterfully done today. I loved it. I thought it was perfect and very easy to be able to follow. Matthew, I could take up a lot more of your time today, but I want to get from you, if someone is listening to this episode, they love the way you described this, they love the way you masterfully went through this. Is there a way what's the best way for them to connect with you to see if this is something you could teach them or teach your team?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. So, I mean, I do a ton of sales kickoffs. So if you're planning one at the moment, definitely reach out. And even if I'm not the right fit, I'll be able to at least point you into some in the direction of somebody that would be. For a lot of the people listening, I have a storytelling chapter in both of my books, and it's funny. My first big technology sales event or sales kickoff that I did, the reason I was hired for that was because they tried to operationalize a storytelling framework for the last 8 months and it failed. And they said, look, you haven't written a book on storytelling. You've written a chapter on storytelling. So we feel like it would be simpler. And how long will it take you to operationalize? And I'm like, well, instead of 8 months, I'll show you how to do it on stage in 8 minutes. And they're like, well, how are you going to do that? I'm like, I'll do it for you right now. And the framework is in chapter 5 of my sales book or chapter 4 of my networking book. But also there's a PDF download of the exact framework that you can just get at matthewpollard.com/storytelling. I also share a ton of story about storytelling on my YouTube channel. And if you have a specific question, connect with me on LinkedIn. And once we're connected, if you don't know this tool exists, by the way, it's the best sales tool on the planet to get people from ghosting you to actually having a dialogue with you again. You can actually send voice notes directly on LinkedIn. Most people don't use it, but for me, I love it because most people don't know what it is yet. So I will always send someone a message like, Donald, if I hadn't heard from you in a while and you weren't getting back to me on the deal, I would reach out to you via an audio voice note. Now, I wouldn't say, hey, Donald, what's going on with that deal? Be a little bit more empathetic than that. I would reach out and say, hey, Donald, I haven't heard from you in a little while. It's so unlike you. Don't worry about the deal. Just let me know that you're okay. And and the person will get back to you via a text message with saying, hey, Matt, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so sorry. They'll give you the reason for why they haven't got back to you, i.e. family things. Don't assume that it's going to be because they had decided not to go with you. And then they'll say, how did you do that? And the biggest reason for why they'll get back to you is because they want to know how you did that, because they want to do it themselves. So because of the combination of you leading with empathy and rather than a sales pitch and doing something that they want to know how to do, they will get back to you.
Yeah, amen to that. I love it. Matthew, this is awesome. Thank you for taking the time to come on a show. Thanks for letting us be able to get connected with you. Appreciate you, man, tremendously.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on.
That was the one and only Matthew Pollard. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you got a lot from his insights today. I loved it. And in particular, I love how these stories are just so simple. We don't have to, it's like he reframed the thinking for this person to rather thinking it's a risk for them to not have a committee to make a decision to I have this opportunity to make a decision. And it was just like brilliant. Loved it. Listen, if you want to connect with Matthew, you want to learn more about him, go on LinkedIn and send him a voice note and tell him you heard him here on the Sales Evangelist, or you can go to his website. We have it in the show notes. Speaking about website, if you want to get help and to improve your sales game and join our mastermind, go to thesalesevangelist.com/mastermind, thesalesevangelist.com/mastermind. This is where we get a chance to practice each week and help you to overcome some of the biggest sales struggles you're facing. In addition, we have our LinkedIn prospecting course where we promise that we can help you to generate 3 appointments per week using LinkedIn without spamming people. It works. I do it, and I know you can too. Find more details in the show notes. As always, I want you to thrive. I want you to raise your level of thinking. I want you to go out and do big things. See you on the next one.